All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely chilling, grimdark fable that questions the very core value of human identity and memory. We are going to unpack a deeply philosophical narrative that forces us to ask a pretty heavy question. What is the actual worth of our suffering, our memories, and our self when put up against the cold, unforgiving math of the cosmos?
We drop right into the action, in media res, at the gates of this unfathomable cosmic utility known as the Sapphire Forge. Picture this. A weary knight walks up. His armor is cracked, his boots are heavy with the ash of 100 forgotten battlefields, and he's carrying a sword notched by vows he completely failed to keep. He is exhausted. He's practically suffocating under the weight of his own name and his kingdom's memory. And we hear his desperate plea. He's demanding that his broken vows, his profound grief, and this lifelong suffering actually mean something.
But here's where it gets wild. The universe, it instantly answers his plea with just crushing apathy. The entity presiding over the forge, known as the Jester of Sapphire Light, doesn't see a tragic hero. He operates under what the source material calls nihilism triumphant. In this systemic worldview, ancient moralities are completely dismantled. The Jester looks at the knight's sacred narrative and his loud, weeping existence and just sees an annoying spike of energy. It's literally just thermodynamic noise to him, something that needs to be solved with absolute industrial finality.
That sets up part one of our Fichtean dialogue, thesis, the biological insistence. This thesis is all about our fierce, biological insistence on our own identity. The human self is acting like a massive anchor here. In fact, the sources call the self the strongest cage ever built. The knight's profound grief, his desperation to be remembered, that's what is termed his narrative inertia. It represents the incredibly high emotional stakes of just existing. He truly believes his history is essential, you know? He believes his pain matters.
And this creates a brilliant clash between visceral human emotion and the cold, clinical reality of the cosmos. On the left side, to the knight, his history, his sacrifices, his vows, they mean absolutely everything. But on the right side, from the Forge's perspective, a lifetime of tragedy is simply biological noise. It's kinetic friction, just a simple mass input for a grand cosmic calculation.
Which brings us to part two, antithesis, the necessary fire. So the universe fires back at the knight's emotional plea with absolute mathematical finality. To this cosmic utility, achieving perfect geometric symmetry is vastly more important than the noisy, weeping existence of humanity. This is the core doctrine of zero-point utilitarianism. The entire goal is to find an ultimate mass-energy balance. It wants to take all that messy, unpredictable, kinetic friction of living drama and resolve it into a forced utopia of absolute stillness.
Let's take a look at the cosmic bureaucracy making this happen, which the text calls the arithmetic of the overman. We've got two main entities perfectly coordinating the conversion of human tragedy into pure data. First is the Jester of Sapphire Light. He's the necessary fire, a clinical catalyst who operates with total aesthetic detachment from human empathy. Then, backing him up, is the Last Thinker. This is a cyber-enhanced arachnid humanoid providing celestial oversight. It literally uses multiple cybernetic limbs for the prehensile logging of distilled essences, making absolutely sure that zero subjectivity contaminates the structural record.
And then the Jester delivers this chilling response, the universe's ultimate no to human empathy. He unblinkingly treats the strongest cage ever built, the human self, as nothing more than a mathematical error to be corrected. To the Jester, human history is literally just friction, slowing down the perfect efficiency of the cosmos.
All right, part three, synthesis, a forced utopia.
This is where that biological insistence and the mathematical no crash into each other, resulting in the literal physical unmaking of the knight's identity. It's a brutally efficient four-step process executed by the Jester. He just extends a single finger of coherent blue light and delivers the Z-pinch plasma touch. This highly specialized touch triggers the conversion of human tragedy straight into structural data. It is a flawless clinical execution.
Step two is the thermal volatilization of identity. Just try to imagine that for a second. All of your memories, your concentrated sorrows, your hard-fought vitality, literally just boiling away. It completely separates the emotional weight from the physical form, turning an entire epic lifetime into a uniform, non-reactive slurry.
Philologically speaking, this process is known as kenosis. It's a deep, transformative, and voluntary emptying. It totally strips away the narrative inertia of the knight's failed heroic journey. It metabolizes the exhausting burden of life and finally frees the subject from the relentless kinetic friction of their own existence. The big takeaway here is the result. A man's entire history, the memory of an entire kingdom, violently distilled into a silent, zero-point silicate artifact for the grand cosmic calculation. Basically, it's a condensed autobiography reduced to a single blue gem, where the internal consciousness voltage is fixed at absolute zero. Perfectly still, perfectly quiet.
But that leads to part 4, the remnant, the thermodynamic echo.
Because you have to wonder what happens to the messy biological leftovers that just don't fit into the universe's geometric perfection. Even perfect arithmetic has byproducts, right? Now, the primary result is total, permanent silence, philologically rooted in the Latin silere. The artifact is documented as a blue star in a perfectly stilled matrix. The last thinker slots it into the custom board recesses of the ledger, which then closes with this heavy, definitive hydraulic thud. The narrative is finished.
But there's a secondary result, a gaping maw. This comes from the Greek chaos, and it represents an unassimilated byproduct of the soul that simply cannot be integrated into perfect arithmetic. It's left entirely outside the ledger's geometric symmetry.
The hollow vessel that's left behind becomes home to a shadow made of chaos and ink, which the sources call the thermodynamic echo. This beautiful, quietly discarded shadow is basically the residual vibration of an exhausted soul. It's a lingering reminder of the human vitality that had to be sacrificed and metabolized just to secure the data.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we see that the cosmic utility's perfect efficiency completely triumphs over biological noise. The loudest weeping existence ultimately yields to perfect stillness. The gesture looks at these discarded remnants, these echoes, as beautifully quiet shadows that simply confirm the total efficiency yield of a universe that values pure data way over living drama.
I'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Even in a universe that demands total industrial finality and absolute stillness, does that lingering shadow of our chaos, that thermodynamic echo, prove that our stories actually meant something after all? Think about that as you consider your own narrative inertia today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we keep exploring the complex and the profound.